So it's 7:30. I'll call the meeting to order and do roll call. Barry Johnson, I'm here. Mark Rubin.
Here.
Joe Perry.
Here.
Randy Freed. Not yet. Abby.
Present.
And Scott is joining us tonight as ex officio. Moving on to number 2, approval of June 1st, 2022 Transportation Committee meeting minutes. You should have all received that today. As long as there's not any objections, if there are, raise your hands. If not, I will consider them approved and call them approved. So doing. Update by the committee chair. The one motion we had at the last board meeting, I actually dropped out of because public safety had done the same motion. We got our signals crossed and they actually did a better version of it. So we let them run with it. And Scott, I believe it passed, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, thanks. So thank you for doing that. That's all I have as far as updates that aren't on the agenda. Do we have any public comments on non-agenda items with the committee within the committee's jurisdiction from our public? That would be Peter Cole if he does. Not seeing a hand raised. And I'll note that Randy has joined us at 7:32. And moving on to number 5, we don't have
Peter has his hand up, Barry.
Oh,
Peter's raised his hand.
Go ahead, Peter.
Hey, Barry. Just wanted to mention, which I've mentioned to you, but let's say it publicly, noticing the delivery trucks backing into Erewhon, that depending on the time of day and the traffic, that I saw that the truck is causing a bit of a jam, so much so that it's causing a bit of a kerfuffle for people making a left turn onto Coldwater from Ventura. So at a busy time of day, that could cause some gridlock. And anyway, that's another issue over at Sportsman's that maybe we can find a way to mitigate. Thanks.
Yes, and I do know that like the Ralph's that's at Vineland and Ventura, on its receiving dock, although it's not a problem causing a problem on Ventura, but they only take truckloads at certain hours, and I think Sportsman's needs to do the same thing. And I believe at that Ralph's, it's like it's quite early in the morning. It's definitely, I don't think they let deliveries arrive there between like 8 and 5 p.m. I'll have to check, but I certainly think that Sportsman's and Erewhon in particular could have the same thing. Even if they have to hire somebody to be at their loading dock at an hour that they're not open, it's just ridiculous. So I am going to look into that. So,
thanks.
Okay. Anybody else on number 4? Does anybody have any comment? Number 5 with oh, I didn't do that. So I'm just going to move on to number 5. Discussion and possible motion with respect to a request for the installation of a smart crosswalk at Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Max Welton Road. When pedestrians are present, a smart crosswalk does not look very different to someone in a moving car. However, when a pedestrian passes through a laser beam at either end of the crosswalk, the system triggers a yellow flashing light a few hundred feet away. Lights also blink on the crosswalk sign and the street pavement itself, outlining the crosswalk. the flashing light helps alert drivers in both directions that there may be people crossing the street. This particular crosswalk happens to have a school on both sides of Laurel Canyon Boulevard. For an example of a smart crosswalk in action, go to Tahunga Avenue and Huston Street in North Hollywood, if anyone wants to see one in action. And I have a proposed motion for this item. The board of the Studio City Neighborhood Council, SCNC, requests Council Member Nithya Raman and the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, LADOT, to install a smart crosswalk at Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Max Welton Road, a dangerous intersection with schools on both sides of Laurel Canyon Boulevard. And the idea for trying to do something at this intersection has come from a stakeholder who sent an email to the board that we received. So do I have a second on this?
Yes.
Thank you, Joe. And moving on to public comment. Go ahead, Peter.
Sorry, I had my hand raised from before. I'll take it down.
Okay. Going on to committee comments. Anybody in the committee have anything on this one? Pretty straightforward. I think considering there's not too many places where you have a school not only on one side but on both sides, so certainly seems like it should qualify. So we'll see what happens, and it might take 7.5 years, but you never know. So I will go to the vote then on this, seeing no more hands. All in favor of this motion, please raise your hand or say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I see Joe is, Randy is, so it is unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to number 6. Discussion and possible motion, community impact statement with respect to Council File 22-0491 for the exclusive use of charging and parking an electric vehicle on public streets and publicly owned parking lots. And I have a proposed motion of the board of the Studio City Neighborhood Council, SCNC, opposes Council File 22-0491, Raman, to designate exclusive electric vehicle parking spaces on public streets and publicly owned parking facilities, unless a formula is devised to have no more of a percentage of these exclusive parking spaces than the percentage of electric vehicles in the city of Los Angeles. Over time, as the electric vehicle percentage increases, so can the percentage of exclusive electric vehicle parking spaces. To blindly create too many exclusive electric parking spaces now would only serve to punish those who may not be able to afford their first electric vehicle at present. Do I have a second?
Second.
Yes.
That second from Abby, thank you. Go ahead. Oh, Joe, did you have your hand up?
That was a mistake. I'm sorry.
Okay. I think this one's pretty straightforward. I think our council member has good intentions, but I'm not sure if she thought out a formula. Like, I can see the city doing this and converting 50% of the parking spots to this, and most of them will be empty. because we don't have 50% of the people that are parking in public spots are not in electric cars. So I really think they need a formula, and they need to devise a formula. And I do think, even, let's say there's 10% of the cars now are electric, I even think 10% might be too much, because I'm told by people that have electric cars that they almost never charge their cars at one of these, because they do it at home and these charge you. So I'm not even convinced that if we have 10% cars, that we need 10% of these to be parking spots. So anyway, go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, sure. So as someone who drives an electric car, I mean, I think that, like, I like the motion in terms of coming up with a system. I guess I would overlay that. I just wonder, it's probably not even talked about by our council member, we've lost a lot of parking spaces, and I've even received an email recently as it relates to parking on Tahunga, because during the pandemic, the alfresco dining model and rails were put up, and many parking spaces, or rather the few parking spaces that exist, were, a number of them, half of them have been taken away for street side dining. And I just wonder, what, if any, conversation is there in removing some of that, in light of the fact that now they would be adding spaces or potentially cutting off more spaces for electrical charging. That's part one. And then the only second part to your last comment is I charge wherever. I mean, yes, I charge at home, but I also charge when I'm out and about. And I think a lot of electric car users do, because even if you're charging at home, that still costs money. And the rate that the city charges at most of the city lots, like if you look at the Metro lot, it's pennies on the dollar, especially when you compare what the cost of gas is. I went to an Electrify America charging station, which is like a rapid charge at the Ralph's in Sherman Oaks. I paid $16, which is a lot. But then again, I was charged within 40 minutes and had pretty much a full tank. So by comparison to a tank of gas, it's not a lot at all. So I would disagree. I would push back and say that people do charge at public places.
Okay, and I didn't put any of that in the motion. So I mean, I think, like I said, if it's 20% of the cars are electric, I think it's fair to have 20% of the parking spaces have these chargers, perhaps.
Right. I think it makes sense, actually, though, that there should be a metric, because actually, the more I think about it, you're right, considering the city loves to find a way to monetize things. And if it's a free-for-all, I would assume they would want it, although they're capital intensive because you have to put a charger there. But still, it starts monetizing even more parking, and then box out regular parkers. So there should be a metric that matches how many electric cars are actually on the street.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Joe.
I feel it's part of the planning that in a way is punitive. It's trying to kind of nudge people into using electric cars. And I understand that, but they have to really weigh the needs of everyone. There's a point where it becomes punitive. And so people in gas cars will have to drive around and not use those spaces, which still happens in some spaces. So that's, I'm not sure that, I think that can backfire. That's it.
Yes. Scott?
Hi, thanks, Barry. I'd be curious on Randy's comment at Ralph's. I see those electric charging spots too, but this is specifically for public streets and city public lots. I wonder how many people are parking, mostly for public streets, say, and say the electric charging stations are prime spots, like the new handicap parking spots. These are the electric spots. And I don't know how, I've never charged an electric car. You go in there and can you plug your car in and buy, you know, $1 worth and then leave your car parked for hours on end and pretending that it's charging? Like, how do they know? How will they enforce this when the charge is over? Say you're going to be somewhere for 3 hours and you've charged in 20 minutes and your car is still plugged in. You're holding a prime spot. Your charging is done. And I don't, this motion is so vague. I just don't think anyone has thought this through, because then we have the permit parking, the street sweeping days, the meters for public parking on public streets, and the fees at the lots. So there's going to be valet parking on streets where people park electric cars, and the valets are going to want to plug the cars they're parking into the electric spots and maybe just pretend they're charging or charge it for 20 minutes. And then of course, what happens when people living in their cars and RVs park in those spots? They won't be able to be towed if this is Nithya Raman's, Councilmember Raman's motion. So I think it's so hopelessly vague and not thought out. It's not ripe yet. And I agree with Barry to oppose it. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Did you have more,
Hey.
Joe?
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Okay. And
Hey, Barry,
Randy, I was,
yeah, sorry, just to answer some of Scott's questions if I can. So there are already random public chargers on public streets. So for example, at Moore Park, right across from that Universalist church, there is a LA City charger. There's, they're in seemingly random spots around the city on public streets. And of course there are on public lots. One of the ways that a lot of the chargers get a deal with what you're saying is, yes, you could charge $1, $10, $20, so long as you're plugged in, or whatever credit card or payment source you have, stopped at some dollar amount. A lot of the chargers, depending on which company the city's going to go with, a lot of the chargers, you can't even take the charger off of the dock until it's authorized payment, number one. Number two, a lot of them, once the charging is complete, they will charge you an idle fee. So you'll have like 1 hour of free time parking, and then they'll start charging you. At least at some of them, I don't know. It seems like I agree with you that they're pretty much ad hoc. It seems like they're different in different parts of the city. I don't know if we would follow suit of like what Beverly Hills has done, charging units in Beverly Hills. You can only park an electric car charging place. You have to be actively charging, or you can get cited. You can get a citation, from parking enforcement in Beverly Hills. I don't know if LA is thinking about doing something like that. But anyway, but I agree, we should likely oppose.
Thanks for that explanation.
Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, I've got an electric car. I probably wouldn't use these. I think what's left out of this, if you're going to litter the city with these chargers, they should be really fast chargers, because if you put up a slow charger, you're just going to invite people to sit plugged into these things forever. So I think it would depend on how fast the charger is for me to want to say yes to this.
Yeah, and her motion has not determined that yet. So anybody else on this item? Okay, I think the one phrase in this motion that says, unless a formula is devised, I think that kind of says it all, that her motion needs a formula and it doesn't have one. To me, it just says, we're going to start doing these all over, and they're never going to actually care the percentage that of the parking spots they're taking away from those that don't have an electric car. So they need to figure that out. Go ahead, Joe.
So do we want to say a formula that reflects the percentage of electric car users versus gas, or something else, not just because the formula could be that they want to do 3 times the number of current electric car users, hoping that there will be more. Do you see what I'm saying? If we could say like one that reflects the actual
Well,
number.
we're saying no more than, no more of a percentage than we have electric vehicles in the city of LA. And
I get it.
that they can determine. Yeah,
Okay,
on DMV records.
right. And that, you know,
So-
right. And also would depress, I think, business. It could.
It could, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else on number 7? Okay, I will move to go to the vote then. All in favor of the motion for agenda item number 7, please raise your hand or say yes. I'm a yes.
Yes.
And
Mandel, yes.
Yep, I got everyone. How about Mark?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. All right, unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to number 7, update on the progress of remaining board path preferential parking district applications. So Fred from I think he's on Big Oak Drive, the city council finally passed the extension of PPD 276. So they're on their way finally to getting permit parking. And I believe of all the ones that we supported over the years, and Joe, you correct me if I'm wrong, the only thing that's left is your neighborhood getting added to one of the parking.
I have no
numbers.
idea. I mean, the person that was engaged in doing it is a total burnout. I don't blame him.
That's okay.
And
I will check into it, but I do
And we
know
had-
that like your street doesn't
Just-
have anything yet.
no, just so everyone knows, our street, all we're asking is to extend an existing district, a block north, that's a block north of us. We had a meeting with Barry and with Felix and in the office of Paul Krikorian, and that was like the end. It's like we went into an abyss after that. He
Correct,
never
and it
got
was
in touch with-
supported.
Well, I mean, some of the things I feel asked for were too much by my neighbors, but they just, there's a black hole at DOT and this one in it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff they have promised our neighborhood because we live right off Laurel Canyon and there's schools and there are a lot of things going on. So nothing, 0.
But our neighborhood council did pass a motion in support of your street, so I'm gonna look back into that and
Thank you.
see
Thank you very
where
much.
that's at.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't
Mark.
know where if
Oh.
there were signatures too, I have no idea. What happens is
Okay.
that years have passed now, but thank you.
Well, if Felix has them, they're still good because they've delayed, they've even said the deadlines don't matter because they got delayed for COVID
Good.
and other things. So, yeah,
would be
I'll
great.
check.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
Mark?
Fred is on Picturesque, not on Big Oak.
Oh, okay, thanks. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that the extension of 276, I think it's now covering your whole neighborhood. There's nothing that's left out anymore.
I don't know what the neighborhood is. I don't think, I haven't heard about whatever happened to the 6 or 4 or 8 houses from Picturesque on Sunshine Terrace, from Picturesque up to what we call the 5-way, where Laurel Crest and Buena Park come in. Those people wanted to get added on too, and I don't know what happened with them. And then in terms of, neighborhood, I guess you could say that it would also extend all the way on Sunshine Terrace down to Carpenter and possibly Carpenter to Laurel Canyon. And I don't think anything's gone on with that. And I think the people on Reclaw over on that side between Sunshine Terrace and Carpenter Court, I think they dropped the ball on it there too. So I don't
Yeah.
think, yeah.
I was just going to say I'll check the map and just see what is complete and what's not. But I do know Susan Martyr's neighborhood around Carpenter School and Reclaw. She had told me some time ago that they had given up because they did not have enough support.
Yes, that's what one of the places I was talking about. That's Reclaw. Well, Reclaw only goes between Sunshine Terrace and Carpenter Court. But yes, that's exactly the part that I was talking about.
Okay. Go ahead, Lionel.
Yes. I'm sorry. Did we already pass general public comment?
We did, but since you joined us late, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much. My name is Lionel Mares. I'm a resident of Sun Valley, but I do frequently go to Studio City a lot. I'm calling because my public comment is that I would like the transportation committee to maybe do more to for bike infrastructure, like dedicated bike lanes or bike paths, because like so many bicyclists that we do enjoy bicycling, and Studio City is a beautiful place, and I do go there on Sundays for the farmers market and the weekends, and but there's no bike lanes on Ventura Boulevard, and maybe we could consider maybe pushing for bicycle safety. Lastly, I would like to see maybe a ciclovia event sometime in the near future in the San Fernando Valley, and I think Studio City will be a great route because of the small businesses that are there, and I think it'll be very great for businesses in that area. Hopefully that made sense. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. And you should also know that years ago, LADOT stated that they were not going to do bike lanes on Ventura Boulevard because in Studio City, Ventura is at its narrowest width. But instead, and we have a long-standing plan to have a bike lane along the LA River, which actually in Studio City, once it's in its totality, you can approach all the businesses on Ventura from behind for the most part. And that bike lane along the south side of the river is planned to have ramps up to the retail areas in Studio City. So, and that's actually safer than riding on Ventura Boulevard anyway. So that's what we're still pressing for, but as you know, you may know that it's been a long and slow process getting the LA River bike lane in. So, but that's what we want for Studio City. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I was just going to say, we had ciclovia here. I don't remember how many years ago in Studio City in this area. I don't know how they cycle through the city and decide, how they move around the city in order and decide where to do it. But we did have it not too long.
Right, and they did close Ventura that day.
Yes, they did.
Lankershim and Ventura, I believe.
Right. So it'll come back, I think. It just,
yeah.
They go through the whole city and then start over.
There's one this coming Sunday on Western Avenue, I believe, in the South LA area. Go ahead, Lionel.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I think to answer her concerns, we did have a ciclovia event at least one time that I could remember in the San Fernando Valley, but I think we had to push our because ciclovia relies on it's a nonprofit organization. They rely on donations or fundraising or grants. And we have to also, as a community, we have to advocate and push our city council to do more, to maybe to help expedite maybe an event in the San Fernando Valley, because I know many bicyclists do come from the San Fernando Valley, and I'm one of them. And secondly, yes, the Ciclovia event is this Sunday, and Western Avenue and Exposition Boulevard through Florence. It's a 3-mile ride towards Western and Florence. And the second Ciclovia event will be on August 21st, I believe, and Hollywood. It's going to connect West Hollywood and East Hollywood. That's the second Ciclovia event.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was just trying to look up the date of the Studio City Ciclovia, which was, in fact, it went from Coldwater and Ventura down Ventura to the Campo de Cahuenga, and then it went on Lancashire. I think just up to Moore Park. It might have been to Riverside.
Okay. Yeah, that rings a bell. Thanks.
And I don't know how Ciclovia chooses their locations. I know there's a huge amount of outreach that goes along with it, getting all the stakeholders, including the businesses that have to close down, on board with it. They're a very inclusive organization.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna move on from number 7 then. To number 8, update on the progress of the new traffic signal installations at Ventura Boulevard and Berry Drive and Ventura Boulevard and Rhodes Avenue. As many of you may have seen by driving on Ventura, on the 29th of June, late in the afternoon, the signal started operating at Ventura and Berry. So only 7.5 years later. But I think I'm just glad it's finally there. And the one at Ventura and Rhodes, I saw people working there a couple days ago. So it's in the works, but it's just not happening yet. So, but it's not been on the books to be done for 7.5 years yet either. So we'll see. Go ahead, Mark.
Yes, 2 things. One is just FYI, the Ciclovia in Studio City was on Saturday, March 21st, 2015. I knew I had it written down somewhere because I volunteered for it and rode around all day with pump and tire and inner tubes and tools to help fix flats for people, and nobody had a flat. So I was considering putting thumbtacks out to make more flats that I could fix. But besides that, about the traffic signal, do you know, I didn't see it, you were the one who saw it go in. Did they do anything more than just flip a switch to turn it on from all the work that they had done 6 months prior to that, 6 months to a year prior to that? Or was there actual physical work that was done to get it operational? Do you remember?
What I saw on that Thursday, by going by there a couple times, they were finishing, like pointing the signals. They had been turned sideways, so they were pointing them in the right direction. This was before it was turned on. And they also were sandblasting some of the lines for the turning lane, because now there's a turning lane into coming eastbound, going into our favorite race car shop. They were also painting the crosswalks there too. So there was a lot of activity with painting and finishing the actual signal pointing and stuff. I'm assuming, I wasn't there when it actually got turned on, but I'm assuming they just flipped some sort of switch, in the junction box that's on the corner there. So
yeah, I was just curious. I was just curious about, the long delay from the flurry of work when it was put in
Yeah.
to this, whether there was anything. Also, I live very close, but I rarely go by there these days. Is there a left turn lane from westbound Ventura onto southbound Berry?
Yes, there is.
Okay, because that was the hugely important thing to get in.
Right,
Thank you.
right. And yeah, when I saw this on the 29th, I thought, okay, I'm glad they're doing all this, but it'll still be another month before they turn it on. And then the next day, on the 30th, I drive by there and it's on. I was just in total shock because they've never worked so fast at in all this time. But the last 2 days, they were like working like the earth was going to end tomorrow. So yeah, glad to see. And we'll just have to keep an eye on Ventura and Rhodes. And by the way, I believe what they're doing at Ventura Road and Rhodes is the same thing we're now asking for on Laurel and Maxwellton. So stay tuned on that. Go ahead, Joe.
Just when my kids were in school, they had to cross a dangerous sort of intersection at Moore Park between Tahunga and Vineland, and I started working on getting a traffic light, and 17 years later, that light was installed. So it's very slow. That's all I want to say.
Yeah. And didn't Oakwood School have to pay for most of that?
I gave up, and other people, different people kept trying for that. I wouldn't be surprised if
I think I remember hearing that. Yeah.
Also about, just thinking about Ciclavia, I remember, is Lionel is still here. I really got the feeling from the brochure that the people downtown who were organizing it didn't really have any feel for the Valley or for Studio City or this area. It was a funny, and I think, if you get in touch with the organizers, it might help. That's
okay.
a suggestion.
All right, moving on to number 9. Comments from committee members on subject matter within the committee's jurisdiction. And I know Joe has something. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I wondered if you guys have been following the development of transit ambassadors for the subways and buses. If you've been reading the stories in the LA Times and Daily News about that program. Anybody read that?
Yeah. And is that instead of LAPD or in addition to?
It's
or
I
so
guess
they can
it's
use
instead
less
of
police and more of them?
No, it's in addition. It's in addition to. The articles don't explain the details. But when this issue was first came up, actually, our public safety committee, Scott, actually had agendized this as it relates to this ambassador program, and was asking the question of the specific details, or is this in lieu of, in addition to, how many, how's it working? But my understanding is LAPD is still on the trains. There's just very few of them because there's, generally speaking, a shortage of officers. But yeah,
Randy,
anyway,
they cut them after the George Floyd protests in that period. I know they cut I don't know the number, but they were cut. Those officers were.
I only know anecdotally. I literally just took a subway last week and I ran into 2 police officers. So
okay. Well, anyway, so I just wondered, since we are a transportation committee and this is transportation, if anyone has thought about it, or your thoughts on it, or your expectations, or.
So do you think it's a good program, Joe?
I guess, I'm kind of fascinated by it. What's bothering me in general is privatizing things like security. In other words, it's an unintended consequence of certain, very aspirational changes, things being done for very good reasons. But I feel that when we cut trained people who are, I think people have to be accountable, police and everyone have to be accountable. These are people, I looked up the job description for the ambassadors, and they're, and they are trained, but they're not highly trained people. And they're being repurposed from an urban kind of model where you would take people like in a downtown area, and I think something like, and you would welcome them, you would clean, they do a lot of cleaning, power washing, they give directions. They're sort of greeters. They're sort of half janitors, half greeters. And it does make sort of inhospitable downtown areas feel a lot more friendly. And, I understand exactly how that works. I don't think that that's what people want, that the issue is friendliness on the subways, but of course the presence of other people is always helpful. But these people are not union. They are, they don't need any special experience, though it's good if they're bilingual, which I think is great. I'm not saying people aren't trying to do this well, the company's training them, but it's very different from being trained to work on the subways, or, they are trained to use the, radio system and things like that. But their basic design, what they're designed to do is to be a welcoming presence.
Is Metro paying for their salaries?
Yeah. Metro is now Randy will correct me, I know, because he knows more, but they're contracting with these private firms to provide trained ambassadors who then are trained to work, the radio system. And they're trained briefly in how to deal with, homeless people, to give homeless people information on homeless services. To me, that does nothing for homeless people because they already know, most of them. You know what I mean? I just think that's a fake, a sort of sleight of hand. They probably reassure riders because you're not alone on a train, maybe, or things like that. I'm not saying they don't enhance the atmosphere, but I just think it's, to me, privatizing. In other words, if we cut a lot of police, my neighbors are all hiring these private armed things like Post and everything. I'm not sure in the end that's what I want. Some guy being paid by the hour with a gun or something doesn't make me feel too good. And people are arming themselves and all those things. And now that we can carry weapons, we'll have more of
But
that.
these employees are not carrying weapons, are they?
No, but in San Francisco, they now carry mace, handcuffs, and batons because they've needed, some of them do. I've read a little, I'm sure, again, in other words, they're not equipped. They do call the police or radio the police in a violent situation and things like that. They do sort of call in, police when it's required. But I just wonder, it's an interesting new model, which I think can work in certain urban spaces as designed. West Hollywood is hiring a lot of ambassadors and cutting sheriffs, a certain number of sheriffs. They have special problems there, and they're going to have the bars open till 4 a.m. and there's a lot of pickpocketing there. It's a different situation, but I just threw it out there. It's something I think we should pay attention to, maybe follow it, success, or, I don't know what Randy thinks, having gone through it already.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
I'd like to hear what Randy has to say first, and then I'd like to speak.
Okay, go ahead, Randy.
Oh, okay, sure. So yeah, so it's a 5-year, program. It's $122 million. It was money. So Joe's right. It was money that was reallocated post kind of George Floyd. They're only carrying radios, and basically they're able to communicate with law enforcement or county mental health workers. The plan for $122 million will pay for 300 uniformed ambassadors. The goal is, in fact, specifically geared towards security to make the trains feel more secure because crime is up, if anyone read the LA Times article. And you know, it is also, this was a somewhat spearheaded by Mike Bonin. And yes, it's being modeled after the San Francisco model. And so if we look at what ambassadors do in the San Francisco model, they do everything from administering Narcan to drugged out ODing people on the platform to directions to picking up trash. And again, trying, just as Joe said, trying to make it feel more safe. I think yes, it's a transportation issue. And I think, and also, yes, it's 100% a public safety issue. So maybe if we agendize something to talk about, I don't know whether it's we ask someone to speak to it from the city or from the county because the Metro Board approved it, or we work with Jeff, who is now the head of public safety, to maybe try to make another motion or request for action. Yeah, go ahead,
I
Barry.
was just going to say there's probably not a lot we can chime in on until we get closer to the 5 years, the 5-year
Right.
trial being over.
Yeah, I mean, they claim that the goal, again, is to make it safe, and it's about helping with directions, alert police to a threat, point people to homeless services, keep an eye on vulnerable people, check that seats are clean, and passengers are safe. And it will run up to 5 years. So it's not even a guarantee that it'll run the 5 years. It's just that the Metro Board has greenlit $122 million for this program.
And trains, not buses?
Trains, not buses, because the significant increase in crime is happening on our trains and not on our buses.
All right, thanks. Go ahead,
Mhm.
Mark.
Yeah. Once again, I'd like to defer to the other people first.
Okay, go ahead, Lionel.
Yes, thank you. I've attended the Metro Public Safety Advisory Committee meetings, and we had one today. The next meeting will be on July 20th from 5 to 7 p.m. via Zoom. And in my previous meetings with PSAC or Public Safety Advisory Committee from Metro, many of the people voiced their concerns about public safety via Metro, especially the subways and Metro platforms, subway platforms. As you know, since the George Floyd, many people do not want police around subways or Metro buses. So many people push for safety ambassadors who are unarmed, but are there to provide some kind of counseling or I guess to talk to unhoused people who are experiencing a mental health crisis. Because I take Metro myself and I've witnessed many people experiencing a mental health crisis, talking to themselves, yelling, hitting, banging the doors. And I told the Metro Public Safety Advisory Committee about this, and we need somebody to talk to these individuals to make sure it does not escalate into violence or confrontation. Because for example, one time I saw a woman who was experiencing a mental health crisis yelling at a guy right at his face, but the guy stayed calm. He did not react. He did not say a word because he knew that she was experiencing a mental health crisis. So, good for him, man. But I explained to this and we need, and many people do want public safety, but also at the same time they express reluctance to have more law enforcement who are armed on public, transportation. This is why I read the article, not everything. I know a little bit about it, but that they approved to have safety ambassadors on the Metro system. But their next meeting is on July 20th via Zoom from 5 to 7 p.m. You can find it on their website for more information. Thank you.
Thank you for that information, Lionel. Go ahead, Joe.
Two things, and I appreciate that. One comment in one of the articles I read was that people are going to feel safe with this program, but not really be safe. And I'm not saying I agree with that, but there is a huge element of just visibility, you know, the idea that visibility is sort of a magical thing. The people, these people are not experts in mental health or policing or whatever you want to call public safety or anything else. They're people, very good meaning people who have had some training, but I would just say this, what's being expected of these people is way beyond their training or anything like that. Okay. And it's a tough job. They have to stand all day. They're being expected to, I was reading the comments of people in these jobs. There's a big turnover because it's not a fun job. Secondly, to think that basically, you know, untrained people will cure the kind of intractable problems that bring a homeless, mentally ill person onto the subway is a fantasy. You know, and I don't think it's good for our public leaders to encourage this fantasy. I don't know how many beds there even are in LA for the mentally ill. I mean, I don't think we have enough, but anyway, I just feel that it isn't a question of I think we need to be aware of and monitor this in terms of, this is not the only, you know, having brutal racist policing on the one side and having greeters basically and cleaners on the other, that doesn't seem to be, either end is what the answer to these problems. And, you know, police are not trained to be psychiatrists either. And they're the ones that are left with, you know, to deal with a lot of things that isn't in their toolkit. And so I really am concerned about it in terms of, as a sort of cynical, it could end up being a very cynical approach, you know, that just sort of lulls people into feeling that something's being done when what's being done is that people are standing around and, you know, power washing and stuff. But that's it.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I find it ironic that in many ways I agree with what Joe just said, from a 180-degree opposite approach is as opposed to what I believe Lionel said or came up with this, is I absolutely want police on the subway, period. I do not want anybody, and I don't care how well trained they are, someone who is not capable or prepared to handle a violent situation or a situation that, I don't know how to say this legally, the legal thing about this, the difference between assault and battery. Assault is a crime, so it doesn't even have to be violent for it not to be a crime. Before COVID, I took the metro. As a matter of fact, next week, I have to go somewhere that I would love to take the metro, and I used to take the metro before COVID. I will probably never take metro again. Before COVID happened, every time I took metro, an incident occurred. None of the incidents were extremely serious, but there was an incident every time I took it. I also strongly disagree. I agree with what Joe said, that I do not want either extreme of, quote, racist police, unquote, or untrained, whatever you want to call them. However, I disagree with the subtext of that, which is the subtext of our entire country and our city since the George Floyd incident and other similar incidents, that every single policeman in the country, particularly here in Los Angeles, is inherently a racist, violent murderer of minorities. And anybody who's had anything to deal with the LAPD in the past 15 years will know how untrue that is. Not to say that there might not be, nothing is ever perfect, and I'm sure that there is a possibility that there still exists some bad apples, but this commonplace reporting that that's the entirety of policing, especially in LA, I think is nonsense. So I'm against this program. I agree that I think it's a whitewash. It's a Band-Aid over a serious problem. And frankly, I'm disgusted that I can't use the minimal amount of mass transit that we have in Los Angeles, that we paid billions and billions of dollars for, that I effectively can't use it because of programs like this, narratives like this, and concern for people experiencing mental breakdown issues, that somehow their needs trump the needs of the 99% of people who are not having those issues, yet they hold the rest of us hostage because of who they are and what they do. Thanks for listening to me.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Scott, if you're there, we're still on public safety. If you want to let Jeff know, I'm going to defer this issue to the Public Safety Committee for now, because it's truly a public safety issue first, I think. So, and also, if you look at Scott's picture on the screen right now, I believe that was the Ciclavia in Studio City, and you can see Dupar's and McDonald's in the background that of course now are gone, sadly. So moving on to number 10, closing comments by the committee chair. I was just going to mention to Randy, I am looking at for next month's agenda. I'm researching the whole issue of dining going on the streets in place of parking spots, because I think we have to get to an end to that, and the city is working on that, and they are working on increased sidewalk use, but I think when we get to that, we have to get off the streets. It's just, this city is still too dependent on parking spots, and we do not have the transit system that a New York City has, that we can all go without cars. It just isn't possible, and particularly for our residents living up in the hills, it isn't possible. So I'm looking to go do something for that in August. And so our next meeting will be Wednesday, August 3rd at 7:30. The night after National Night Out on August 2nd. And with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn at 8:30. Thank you, Mark. All in favor? Oh, go ahead, Joe.
I'm in favor of adjourning.
Oh, okay.
All right.
All right. Yeah, I think we are unanimous. So I will call this meeting adjourned at 8:30. Thank you all for attending. And
thank you, Barry.
There's a sportsman special meeting on Monday, this coming Monday, the 11th, and then the board meeting 2 weeks from tonight. So thank you all. Thank you, Lionel. All right, bye.